Well, I was wondering, Jim, when you first entered into profound grief, like what you thought the grief process would look like what preconceived notions you might have had,
Mhm.
and which ones held up and which ones did not.
It's a really good question. And of course, it's hard for me to remember exactly what I was thinking. I don't, as I've talked about both with you and in the book, I did not allow for the possibility of Veronica dying. I was
Mm-hmm.
very much in denial, even though everyone around us knew she was
Mm-hmm.
dying. She probably knew she was dying. So the end came rather suddenly for me.
Yeah.
And so luckily, I was surrounded by my family, and my family is very supportive, and they were very supportive. My two brothers took care of everything around those few days. Like I had meetings with the funeral home and all that kind of stuff, which I barely remember.
Mm-hmm.
But anything that had to be taken care of, paid for, organized, they were on it. And obviously, they didn't exclude me from anything. They kept me informed, and I was participating as much as my bandwidth would allow. But I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed with that part of it, which I think was really helpful for me. I could focus on myself and my kids. But when I was in high school, I took a class on thanatology. I went to a Catholic high school. And we, of course, read the Kubler Ross book on death and
Mm-hmm.
dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I mean, the five stages of grief, and you know more about this than I do in your experience. It wasn't really designed for the person grieving as much as for a person that's gotten a terminal diagnosis. But I do think that I held on to them in some small way, like in a little cabinet in my brain that I would occasionally go into and look at. But honestly, the thing I remember most is just chaos
Yeah.
inside my brain. I remember a feeling of disbelief, which I guess correlates in some way to the grief models that people use or misuse. But it was a combination of disbelief and chaos. And fear and anger were rampant. I think fear was probably the biggest emotion that I felt. My relationship with Veronica was very close, and she was also the organizer of our life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know where anything was. I didn't know how anything worked. I drove the car. I went to the grocery store. That was it. And I worked.
Yeah.
She took care of paying all the bills. She knew where all the kids' appointments and the school stuff, all those things. So the reality of looking at that and going, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this, but knowing that I had to do it was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, of course, in addition to all of the other parts of grief of knowing she's not going to be there in my life in any other way. So I think fear was the largest emotion. I guess I'm a self-aware enough person to know when I was bargaining, when I was like trying to make deals with the universe, when I was closing my eyes and pretending.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that sticks out the most for me was I was very resentful. I was resentful, and this goes back to her diagnosis. I remember when we went to do a consult with her surgeon to have the tumor removed, there was another medical suite across the hallway from his. He's a liver guy. He's like a renowned liver surgeon. He had the record for the smallest liver ever transplanted and the youngest liver transplant patient. And what he does every day is life and death. And the medical suite across the hall from him was about aesthetics, like having Botox treatments.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling very resentful that, oh, these people think this is a problem. This is where their focus is in their life. Their money and their time is going to go. I want my lips to be plumper or my thighs to be less.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling very angry at that. And it was the same after she died. I was angry at everybody that still had somebody in their life.
Mm-hmm.
I was angry at children that still had two parents. There was no logic to it. Like there was a part of my brain that was overwhelmed by the emotion, but it sat there and it knew
Mhm.
that this is not a normal way to go through life, but this is also
Mhm.
not a normal time. So I was mad. I was mad at everybody. I was mad at the universe. And I didn't want anybody to ever be happy again,
Mhm.
because that wasn't right. If she couldn't be here and be happy, then nobody should get to be that way. So I don't know if that answers any of the question that you were thinking of. And I could talk
Mhm.
about this stuff forever because it's still, it's been almost 10 years and it's still at times still very present for me.
Yeah.
But I've just learned to have a more healthy relationship with it.
I mean, I think you address the piece of like having this preconceived notion about a model that isn't necessarily what, well, not even not necessarily, it was not built for the bereaved. It was built for people facing a terminal illness, but it's been so widespread as far as a model for grief. And we so desire it to not feel like chaos, for it to feel more organized, to feel like there's a path that we can follow. So, you absolutely addressed that you had many of those emotions you were able to identify through, Elizabeth Kubler Ross's 5 stages, but they might not have been in the same order. You might have had more, you might not have had all of them. And I think that's really important for people to realize
Mm-hmm.
is one, her work was so important, is so important, but it's not meant for a bereaved person because it often is chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just denial. It's not just bargaining,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
they look, and I, from what I remember when I read that book, which I still have a copy of,
Mm-hmm.
it it talks about them like stages that you go through one at a time. It's this one, and then it's that one, and then it's the other one, and then it's this one, and then you're done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously these things are always present, all of them, and that's assuming that the model works for you at all. But the idea of feeling the denial, like the denial for me is mostly gone. I don't deny the facts of what has happened. I still I bargain, but in different ways. But in the early days, those things were present all the time, and they would toggle back and forth in my head like a strobe light. The reason that I wrote all of those Facebook posts that are in the book is that was the only way that I could regulate myself to take that chaos and put it into words and give it a voice. And aside from that, and knowing that I had people around me, other human beings around me, were the only things that really kept me from really losing my shit, because it was bad. And I realized that I've met many people over the years since then who have lost a partner or a spouse that didn't go through what I went through in terms of the depth of it or the severity of it, and they still love their partner. They still suffered a huge loss, but they were maybe better equipped to deal with it than I was. I had really poor coping tools going into this.
That's a
But
great point. That's something that's like, sorry to interrupt you. Like, that's a great point. There's like multiple factors that also influence how you're going to grieve, and your source of and toolbox of coping skills is a
yeah,
huge part of it,
yeah.
which also then influences what grief is going to look like for you.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that we should probably have a longer conversation about at some point,
Mhm.
because I think that it's a really valid point. And it's something that I, I hate the idea of there being any benefit to this, even though
Mhm.
I am benefiting from it in the things that I've had to learn. But that was a big struggle for me, and I'm a better version of myself today than I was then because of what I've had to go through. And that's how life works. Like you can't build great character without great challenges that you have to face. And I feel like I'm even being glib saying that, but
Mhm.
I've learned these things through this process. And the Kubler-Ross model, the idea of any sort of a process in terms of it being a linear thing that you go through a step at a time and then you get to an end, is completely foreign to me in my relationship with my grief. It just doesn't
Mhm.
track.
Yep. I think that's true for most people. And when they try to fit themselves into that, again, an organized path can feel comforting for a little while, but when it doesn't match up with what you're actually experiencing or feeling, it actually can feel worse because you feel like you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And we're already
Yeah.
getting enough of that feedback loop.
Exactly. Exactly.